Good morning, John Gilkison, Aero Stealth here. It is Thursday, April 7th, 2022, and I wanted to shoot a short video on my trip in the Bolt to Monahan State Park and back, which was turned out to be a 726-mile round trip. That includes the driving at the park for a day or two, back and forth to town. It was my first road trip in the Chevrolet Bolt since the Chevrolet dealership installed the new 66 kilowatt hour battery. So I was curious to how the new battery would do compared to the old battery, because we took a trip in February with the 60 kilowatt hour battery in the car, and it did well. I mean, we were trying to work within the limitations of not going very far below 70 miles of range because of the recommendations from GM. But of course, on a road trip, that's not really possible. It takes what it takes to get to a DC fast charger. So I tried to pad the charging there and do a little extra charging so I could keep the bottom end a little higher. And that worked out. We averaged 123 miles per gallon over 800 miles on our trip to Phoenix in February. The long and short of it is my fuel log, which I keep at Echo Motor, it's right here, and we averaged 126 miles per gallon equivalent. It was actually 125.85 or something like that, but just working with round numbers, that's approximately what it was. But there was a problem I had right off the bat, and that is that I ran my very first charger in El Paso. I had to call Electrify America and had to reboot the machine a couple times. And then I got my charge. When I got all done, I wanted to get the numbers, and I couldn't do it. The screen went blank, and it said, "Whoops, there's a problem. We'll send you the data." Well, I've never gotten the data, and the thing of it is what you can do is you take all the other numbers of your charging and then the total amount of electricity that you needed, and what's left over when you subtract all the other numbers from it is the charging session that I had the missing data from. But I sure would like to get a hold of that data. But one of the things I wanted to explain is there's a methodology that I use, which I think is important, to coming up with efficiency figures, miles per gallon E, for road trips. Because what happens is, let's say I do this, I charge at 95% at the house before I leave, and then on the road I never again charge that high. I might be charging from 40 to 70% or something like that on the highway, and then you go, and there's a reason for that, because it's more time efficient not to try to fill the battery all the way back up. And I was being charged by the minute, by the way, so this time efficiency is important in that circumstance, because it takes more time to charge at the higher end of the battery. So anyway, when you figure out miles per gallon in a gas car, you fill a tank, you drive for a week or whatever it is you're doing, and then you go fill a tank back up. And the gasoline on the second time around is replacing the gasoline you burned, or used. And so it's very similar to a situation for electric cars. When you charge your electric car, you're just replacing the electricity you used. It's not the same electricity, obviously, and although electricity is electricity, they're indistinguishable from one another, just as gasoline molecules are. However, so the what you got to do is in this case, if I'm charging to 95%, I have to charge back to 95% in order to really get a true mile per gallon figure. And so I can't do that on the road. I kind of know what's going on because I got my miles per kilowatt hour readout, and I know how my watt hours per mile. So I know how the car is doing in these snapshot instances, but I can't give you an average figure while I'm on the road. I can, but it's just a guess. I'm in a ballpark, so I'm at. So once I got back home, I had, here's my table on it. So I listed all the charging stops and the particulars, you know, the cost and the kilowatt hours and the time and the odometer reading as a back check reference. And so I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had 6 total stops, 3 going and 3 coming back. And then while we was at the park, I used 120 volt charging while we were at the campsite to keep padding the battery, so I wouldn't have to buy that electricity later. And I didn't get a lot out of that. I think I got 26 kilowatt hours. So that was over a 2-day camping experience. So anyway, I charged a lot. So this is important. Once I get back home and I charge back to 95%, I can add all the kilowatt hours up, all the miles, and I can give you a realistic miles per gallon figure. I can't do it before that. And I think this is an important point. Maybe some people might not understand. So my grand total was 726 miles, 194.37 kilowatt hours, and it cost me $27.98 for the electricity. And this was a surprisingly low price. You would think being charged by the minute might end up costing you more, but in this instance, it didn't. It was 12 cents a minute, which is a reasonable figure, and I thought the prices were very reasonable. Of course, they're higher than it cost me at home, but still. So the details are, I would take 194.37 and I'd move the decimal place, so I'd get 194,370 watt hours is what I used, and I would divide that by the miles, which is 726 miles. I ended up with 267.76 watt hours per mile on average for the whole trip. And you put 33,700, which is the amount of energy in a equivalent in a gallon of gasoline. You put that over the 267.76 watt hours per mile. I ended up with 125.858 miles per gallon equivalent. Now this is about 3 miles per gallon better than we did on our trip with the old battery to Phoenix, but I can't say that that's just due to the battery, because in February it was just simply colder weather. And all the way to Monahan's traveling east, I pretty much had a tailwind. I was doing in the high 130s, maybe as much as 140 miles per gallon on the highway, because I had a tailwind. And when I came back, I didn't have a tailwind, of course, but I didn't really have a headwind because the wind was kind of coming out of the south, so it was crosswind, which isn't good but it's not as bad as a headwind. So I was probably averaging in the teens, like 112, 118 miles per gallon coming back home. And between the two, which are about equal lengths, of course, it came out at 126 miles per gallon. So there you have it. That's how I do trips. It makes for an interesting entry at the Echo Motor Garage because I'm essentially treating 6 charging sessions as just one, and all the miles is just one. So I have an entry for 726 miles and 194 kilowatt hours. You'd think I was driving a monster truck, but fun stuff. The boat's not that hard to travel with. I didn't have any trouble with the charging except at that one instance in El Paso. And I'm not sure what was really going on there. I seem to be having trouble with my phone. At the time, it's like there's not enough bandwidth down there because there's so many people in El Paso on the system. Anyway, we got her done. And Electrify America is very helpful, and they're easy to work with. I wish the charging protocols were much simpler like they are at gas stations. And I think that's coming down the road. So we have that to look forward to. So take care, everybody. That's my update as of early April 2022. Keep guzzling that electronium. Bye-bye.